The Friends of the Withlacoochee Gulf Preserve in Yankeetown, Florida presents another speaker in its mission to promote conservation, preservation, and continuing education for all ages.
So without further ado, Florida black bears. They are one of 16 subspecies of black bears located in North America, and they are the only bear species in the state of Florida. So a little history. It's believed that in the 1500s there were around 11,000 black bears in Florida. That's a huge guess. There was no data back then. That's just kind of the best we can assume based on what we know. As you can see, by the 1950s, things were a lot less. That 500 number in the 1950s is still kind of a guess. It's before we were really keeping good records of wildlife and using statistics to figure out how big wildlife populations are. So maybe not completely accurate, but you know, the big picture here is the population was way lower than it had been. In the early 70s, the state of Florida, the Game and Fish Commission, as it was called back then, reduced hunting except for in the Apalachicola National Forest and Baker and Columbia counties in North Florida. Everywhere else in the state, bear hunting was closed starting in 1971. So in 1974, the Game and Fish Commission listed the Florida black bear as threatened, state threatened, which gave it a little more protection, but still in those northern areas they were allowed to be hunted each year during the hunting season. 20 years later, in 1994, they was finally closed hunting altogether, even in North Florida. And that's just kind of how it stayed for quite a while. In 2010, there was a new listed species rule that was adopted by FWC at that time. And bears did not qualify to meet the listed status, so they were removed from the threatened species list in 2012, and that's where they remain today. Part of this was because FWC developed a bear management plan, which laid out a clear path to maintain the bear population at a sustainable level without letting it drift into extinction. And then, as you probably all know, in 2015 there was a regulated limited bear hunt that was tried and succeeded, I guess, in the state of Florida. It was very popular and very unpopular at the same time, but it happened, and it hasn't happened since, but it's something that's kind of on the table for another possibility in the future, I guess. In 2017, the Fish and Wildlife Commissioners asked the bear management staff to update the management plan, and in this management plan, they wanted a section on population management that included the potential for hunting. There are no hunts, to my knowledge, planned for any time in the future, but it is a population control method that's still potentially on the table. So this map kind of shows where the big populations of bears are in the state of Florida currently. There are about 7 areas where they kind of congregate. As you can see, the Ocala area is the biggest, and there's a lot of bears in that area. The Apalachicola area is also pretty big, and then down in South Florida. They got a big population down there as well. We are in the Big Bend area, and you see our number is pretty low, 30. We have the smallest little population in the state, and it covers a pretty big area, basically from here even further north all the way down through Hernando County into northern Pasco County, pretty much hugging the coast where things are not developed, you know, the nature coast. So a little about bears in general. Bears occupy what we call a home range. This is different than a territory. A home range is an area that a bear will be in and use for food and shelter, but it's not necessarily something they defend, and so home ranges can overlap. Bears typically aren't in the same part of a place at the same time. So they don't defend a territory, but they do occupy home ranges. These are examples of male home ranges in North Florida. They're fairly big, but you can see that they do overlap. And then females have much smaller home ranges. There will typically be 5 or so females that somehow touch a male's home range, and they may come in contact throughout the year, but they typically are solitary and stay apart from each other. So more about the different sexes. Males are quite a bit bigger usually than females. In this picture, the bear on the left is a male, and the bear on the right is a female. Quite a bit of difference there. The home range sizes of males is also very much different. Average 62 square miles for a male compared to 15 for a female. And in general, the males are just more active, mobile, they're more risk-taking, while the females will kind of hide out and be a little more reserved and take less risks, I guess. So some preferred habitats. What you saw driving in today was pretty good bear habitat, actually. Dense palmettos are great. They like pretty much anything with a dense shrub layer in the understory. But they will use a variety. They'll use pretty much any habitat you can imagine in Florida, including urban areas. But when it comes to like their comfort zone, this is kind of what they like. The dense shrub layer also serves as good denning habitat for when they den up in the wintertime and for when females have cubs. Palmettos are also a really good food source. The palmetto berries are a big food source for bears. So really, anytime you're driving through anything thick, you know, a bear would probably really like that. As far as breeding goes, typically, like I said earlier, bears are solitary, but they will come together in the summertime in June and July and mate. Females will then start to den in the late fall and winter, and cubs are typically born in late January to February in Florida. It's weird, they're kind of all born at the same time because of this thing called delayed implantation, where a female can actually have a fertilized egg, but it won't implant in her uterus until a certain time, and that basically makes all the cubs born around the same time every year. The delayed implantation has to do with the female's health. Basically, if the female has an egg that's fertilized, but she's not got the winter weight she needs and the health she needs to get through the winter, the egg will not implant until she's reached that stage. It's really pretty neat. So cubs are very cute, of course. Yeah. I have actually, I don't do this talk very much, but I have been able to work with bears a little bit and bear cubs, and they really are something. Like they're like little human babies. They cry and they sound just like a human baby. It's really kind of cool. But when they're born, they're about the size of a Coke can, about 12 ounces. Typical litters are 2 to 3 cubs, but they can range anywhere from 1 to 5. Like I said, they're all usually born in the late January, February time period. So they stay in the den with their mother until they reach about 5 pounds in April, which is when they become mobile. And then they'll stay with their mother until the following spring. The following spring, females they can stay in the same general area as their mothers. So like their home ranges can then overlap their mothers, and they often will. The males, however, are kicked out. They have to go, and so they are the ones that have to look further to establish their own home range, which is tough. And so that's why a lot of the interactions you get in urban areas and bears getting in trouble are young males, because they're off trying to find their place in the world, and they often come across things that get them in trouble along the way. So diet, a lot of people don't realize, but the vast majority of a bear's diet is plant material, berries and seeds and even grass and palmetto hearts, things like that. That's really what makes most of it up. Insects are another fairly big part. Bears are pretty lazy. They don't like to exert a lot of effort in getting their food. So it's really easy to just eat acorns off the ground or pick berries or nibble on some grass, or just roll over a log and get into a nest of termites or whatever they might find under there. So really, larger animals are not a very big part of their diet, because they don't want to exert the energy to get that food. So really, usually what those animals are that make up that 5% are things that play dead, like possums or armadillos. They roll over and play dead, and the bear can easily get that. They do eat a lot of carrion or just dead animals like roadkill or whatever. And occasionally they can come across a little fawn or something that's been stashed by its mother that's a fairly easy meal, but that's, I think, pretty rare. Mostly plants and insects. So during the summer, they need about 5,000 calories a day to maintain a good, healthy weight, which in my notes here they have is about 2 large pizzas. Hopefully they're not eating large pizzas, but that's what it is. But as they get closer to the winter, to the denning period, they go through a period of increased eating called hyperphagia. And this is where they will try to eat close to 20,000 calories a day. That's a lot of stuff, 80 pounds of fruit, 5,000 acorns, or 10 large pizzas. But they have to stay active a long time to get those calories. So whereas in the summer they may just come out at daylight and dark and be able to get their food, gearing up for winter, they've got to stay active sometimes up to 18 hours a day just to get those calories. They have an excellent sense of smell, which helps them find all this food that they need. As you can see here, they are about 7 times more powerful than a bloodhound, which is a lot more powerful than us. So their nose is what really guides them to all the food that they find and have to eat. Basically, like it says here, how a bear will see the world. It's thought that their eyesight is about as good as ours. We don't really know that, but that's just kind kind of what we figured, but as I was going through this before this talk, I was just thinking, you know, if I have to look out there and find 20,000 calories, you know, just with my eyes, like I'm probably in trouble. So it's a good thing that they have that nose to help guide them around for that. It can lead them into trouble sometimes too, but they really need it. So their behavior, typically bears are what we call crepuscular, which means they're most active at dawn and dusk. The long shadows cast by the sun during these times of day make them more cryptic with their dark coloration. But they can also be active any times of day, especially as they're gearing up for winter when they're out feeding for 18 hours a day sometimes. Once you get into like more urban areas, you start seeing just more nocturnal bears because they're trying to avoid humans. Humans typically aren't out at night, so you might see bears roaming around kind of all through the night in those areas. Here you go. Bears, when they are confronted and they feel threatened or in danger, they usually will try to avoid that in one of three ways or whatever, like by running away, climbing a tree, or just running off and hiding. This bear, as you can see, climbed a tree, and his big threat was this little cat who his name is Jack, apparently, and actually treated this bear twice, apparently. So they really try to avoid confrontation most of the time. At least a wild bear will, even from a little cat. That is a great picture. Bears are very curious. A lot of people think, you know, when they see a bear standing up, that's, you know, uh-oh, it's aggressive. But it's actually not. They're usually standing up because they're trying to see something better or smell something better or hear something better. Just a curiosity stance. Not aggressive at all. They can't walk very well like that. If you picture a penguin kind of waddling, that's kind of how they have to do, standing on two legs. This is a great video here. I love this video. Just kind of showing the curiosity of a bear. So yeah, that bear was just, you know, saw some ladder up a tree and was like, oh, I'm just going to check this out. Didn't even realize there was a guy sitting at the top of it. But then when he was aware, you know, he just turned away in shame and backed down and ran off. I love that video there. But when they do feel threatened, they tend to let us know, kind of like a rattlesnake will. They have things that they can do to let us know that they're not comfortable with the situation and would like things to change. They have defensive posturings, again, kind of like a rattlesnake. So a rattlesnake will rattle to alert something that it's too close. It's not telling the thing, I'm about to bite you and eat you, it's telling you to get away. Same thing with bears. If they want to cause you harm, they're going to stay quiet. They're not going to make themselves known. So, luckily, we can do things to de-escalate the situation a lot of times. These are some of the common things that a bear will do when feeling threatened. The bluff charge is big. The jaws popping is another big sign. Often they'll stomp the ground and make that huff sound. But typically they do this and just walk away if the threat does not escalate from that. I have never luckily experienced that myself. I know people that have, and I can imagine that's very scary, you know, if you're sitting there and a bear comes charging at you. But if that ever happens to you, if you can keep your wits and just, you know, back away, not escalate the situation, oftentimes things will turn out okay. So there's a few different kind of categories I guess we go through to determine whether or not a situation with a bear is bad. Most encounters are of normal behavior, where a bear is far away, they're not showing that they've lost fear of humans. They want to stay away, and you know, in these cases, it's good to just enjoy that view from a distance. And depending on what they're doing, you may need to take some action. But yeah, obviously, if you're just out in a wild setting, you just enjoy it from a distance and then move on. This is also a good time if you're in your neighborhood and you see a bear kind of wandering around. After you've enjoyed it for a minute, it might be a good idea to you know, make it not feel welcome. Because typically a bear in a neighborhood is there for a reason. Again, they've got strong noses. They're not coming to your neighborhood probably because they want to lay down in your bush. They probably want to get in your garbage can or your bird feeder or your neighbor's bird feeder or something like that. So in an urban setting or a residential setting, if you can, it's always good to not make the bear feel welcome so that they hopefully won't come back very much. So that's when you can try to scare that bear. And there are several different ways you can do this. Loud noises are always good. Some people will use these motion sprinklers for things that come around in their yard, bears included, but those work for a lot of different wildlife. Firecrackers obviously make a loud noise. Bear spray can be used if you know, obviously if you're having repeated trouble, they will definitely react to that. The slingshots and paintballs, there's apparently some information on our FWC website about that. I can imagine we probably don't advertise that as like the go-to thing to use, but used properly, they can be effective in deterring a bear from wanting to be around. Going back to bear spray though, bear spray is way more effective than a gun. A lot of people just don't know or don't want to believe that, but bears are really tough, and you know, guns oftentimes just don't work, or you miss, or you just make them mad. But bear spray, man, that stuff will really get their attention and really make them want to go the opposite direction. Yes, ma'am?
I'm not familiar with bear spray. What is it made of? Like, what is it that they don't like about it?
It's essentially pepper spray is what it is. Well, I think more concentrated than you would get for like people protection. But it has a good, you know, it has a good long range. That I've never again used it with a bear, but I have sprayed some, and it'll reach out there a good ways. And I have seen, I'm surprised I don't have some of the videos on this presentation, but I've seen some videos of even big bears, grizzlies and polar bears getting hit with bear spray, and man, they just turn tail and they get out. It must not be a comfortable thing at all. That all being said, using bear spray, you do need to be aware of the wind direction, because you don't want to be on the receiving end of that pepper if it were to come back. But if you're going to be in bear country, we recommend having some bear spray easily accessible. You don't want to have it deep down your backpack. You know, they have carrying cases you can put on your belt or backpack strap or something like that. But it is a very effective tool. So getting into a little more of a concerning situation is when bears are not scared away by those loud noises that you make. They start eating food from residential or urban areas out of garbage or pet food left out or bird seed. Or, you know, you've got a female protecting food or cubs in the area. These are where you need to start being a little more careful. You can still try to scare the bear, but you want to do it from a very safe location, like, you know, making noise from the door of your house or flipping lights on and off from inside your house, because this is when things could be getting a little sketchy, I guess. And this is when you would definitely want to report the behavior and the location to FWC, so that we can hopefully start helping try to remedy the situation. The final one is threatening behavior. You know, when a bear loses its fear of people and starts coming up to them, just continuously hanging out in human use areas, going into buildings or tents. Those kind of things are a big red flag. And at that point, you just need to get out and let somebody know and stay safe. So there's a difference between a bear encounter and a bear attack, of course. Hopefully most bear encounters are good, like what's in the picture. You know, you're just hiking through the woods, you see a bear, you enjoy it, and you go your separate ways, and all is good. Bear attacks are a little different, obviously. The old saying is if it's black, you fight back. If it's brown, lay down. We only have black bears in Florida, so the recommendation is to fight back with everything you got if you ever find yourself in that situation. Very, very rare, very, very rare. Only 35 people have ever been injured by bears in Florida, and only 13 of those even required any medical attention beyond just basic first aid. So not a very common thing at all, but we do have a lot of bears, so it's not impossible. And as we increase our numbers in Florida, which happens every day, our influence is going to just continue to grow more heavily on bears. So there's these kind of three stages of human influence. There's the habituation, where a bear becomes accustomed to people being around. It sort of starts to lose its fear. It doesn't run off every time it sees people. This is not necessarily a bad thing when it's all by itself, but still not something you would really want. Then there's food conditioning, which is when bears start to associate people with food. They may still be scared of people at this time, but they come visit your garbage can at night, and they're associating food with being around houses and the people that live in those. What's really bad, though, is this last one, the food condition and habituated, when a bear loses its fear of humans altogether and associates humans with food. That is when we have a really, really big problem. Accidental feeding is probably the most common way bears start to associate people with food. getting into garbage cans, pet food left outside, bird feeders are a big thing. So the key to try to kind of stop that is to think about attractants and remove those from outside our homes before this ever becomes an issue. Some common things that we ask people to do, is keep your trash indoors until the morning of your trash pickup. Don't leave pet food outside. If you've got bird feeders, pull them in at night, or you can hang them up on a line 10 feet off the ground and 4 feet from a tree, things like that. Cleaning grills is another big thing. A dirty grill is obviously a very strong attractant for bears. So things that, a lot of people, especially new people coming into Florida that aren't used to living around bears, just don't think about. And so it's kind of our responsibility to spread the word of these, they're a little inconvenient, maybe having to keep your trash in overnight if your trash comes early in the morning or something like that, but it really does make a big difference if you can do that. So this slide just kind of shows the number of bear calls FWC has received over the last 20 years. You can see that it has gone up. And I suspect a lot of this is human population growth in the state over that 20 years. There's also been a lot more outreach and education like I'm doing today, letting people know that FWC is who to call if you see a bear or have a problem with a bear. So there's a lot of calls every year, and as the population grows, both of bears and humans, these numbers will probably at least stay the same, if not grow also. The reason for a lot of these calls is mostly just a general interaction. You saw one in your yard, or there was one in the tree in the neighborhood or something like that. Garbage is the second biggest one. We think that a lot of these general interaction calls are, a bear in a neighborhood probably on its way to get into somebody's trash or somebody's bird feeder. So the trash thing is something we really try to harp on to just help stop, these interactions at all, these bad interactions. If we can solve the trash and attractants problem, that can solve a lot of the calls and a lot of the negative interactions bears have with humans in Florida. Excuse me. This graph just shows bear mortalities that we know of in Florida over the years, last 20 years. You can see the vast majority of mortalities are roadkill. Lots of roadkill bears every year. Since 2012, there's been over 230 roadkill bears every year. The one year we did have the harvest, 2015, the harvest actually outweighed everything else. But since then, it's basically roadkill. The green is the bears that we have to deal with, FWC, the ones that have gotten into trash and just can't be moved off or dealt with, or they're starting to threaten humans. So FWC is left to handle those so that we don't have any big problems. So garbage. There's a lot of things we can do with garbage aside from trying to keep it indoors until day of pickup. Commercial garbage is obviously a big thing. Dumpsters are outside all the time. And this picture just shows what a bear can do with those plastic lid dumpsters that you see everywhere. Those are nothing. So we really try to push for dumpsters with metal lids. And this one over here has a clip on the side so that the door on the side can't be slid open. Bears will definitely figure out how to do that if it's not secured some other way. So those are just some general guidelines we try to give to commercial areas. Residential garbage, like I said, the biggest thing is if you can just secure garbage until the morning. We can also retrofit existing cans. I don't know if you can see, but these cans have little clips on the tops that prevent the lid from opening easily. This can deter a bear. They don't always work completely, but again, bears are lazy. Anything that causes more effort will a lot of times prevent them from going further. Something about this, though, is that a lot of waste management companies don't really like these because it takes more time to open the garbage guys to get the stuff out. So you have to work with your waste management provider before doing something like this. Another option is a bear or a can caddy to store your garbage cans in outside, but in a structure that a bear can't easily get to before pickup. I'm starting to see a lot of these around, so this must be becoming a popular thing, which is good. And then there are bear-resistant garbage cans that you can buy. So if your waste management service doesn't mind these, or you don't have a collection service and just have one on your own, this is an option that you can get. I'm not involved with this very much, but I know FWC has worked with a lot of municipalities and local governments to try to get these in areas where bears are a serious problem. And they have had some success, especially I think in North Florida. So hopefully this, never becomes an issue in your area, but that is an avenue, if it ever does, to try to work with your local governments to get things like this in place so that this doesn't become a huge problem. Other ways of securing things are electric fence. A lot of people use this for livestock or even their trash cans or gardens, things like that. We do have some information on how to install electric fences and where you can get the materials and stuff on the FWC website. Here is a video. This is in Alaska, and they've put an electric fence around the dump. Those are grizzly bears. And so you can see there's 3 bears, and each one of them has to learn their own lesson. But it definitely gets their attention. And it's obviously not a comfortable thing when it happens, but it doesn't have any lasting effects on them. And so we realize that not all bears are created equal, and not all rules will apply for every bear. This particular bear is somewhere up in Canada, and these people have done their due diligence and they've got their bird feeder out on a line 10 feet off the ground and 4 feet from a tree, but this particular bear is very persistent and does get its prize at the end of the day. But you can see it down here at the bottom, there's the old pole and there's a squirrel baffle. So they used to have this feeder on the ground, and obviously this bear was getting into it there. And so they moved it up in the tree, or between the trees, but that's a very crafty bear there. So they're gonna have to try something else. All right, so FWC policy. We really try to give technical assistance when needed. When there's a bear situation between a a person in an area. Most of the time, we'll take calls, we'll give information over the phone, but we put a lot of the responsibility on the complainant or the person that has the problem with the bear. Because like I said, bears don't just come just to come. They're attracted to something. And so we really try to work with people to get them to secure their attractants. And you know, the majority of the time, if they can just do that, then the bear will wander on. This is not so easy when you live in a neighborhood and you may be securing all your attractants, but your neighbor maybe doesn't or doesn't know what's going on or whatever. So in those situations, we try to work with the whole neighborhood, and we'll go out on foot and knock on doors and hand out information on bears and how to secure attractants and things like that. In fact, as I was driving in here, it's been a couple years, but a few years ago, there was a bear roaming around near the school up here. And so we went to the school and then around the neighborhoods there, handing out information. And I think that bear ended up moving on. I don't recall for sure, but there are bears in this area from time to time. But anyway, back to this. So if the problem area has been contained, so, you know, attractants secured and everything is good there, the people in the area are doing their due diligence, and the problem still persists, then FWC will have to take further action. We'll visit the site, try to point out anything else that we can do to try to get the bear to go away. But basically our last resort is to try to trap the bear and relocate it. The problem with that is that it doesn't work very much. You can see that most bears that we trap, or at least half of them we trap, do it again somewhere else, or they just come back and do it again in the same place. They will travel a long distance to come back to where you trap them from. Another thing with traps is once you trap them once, you know, they've learned that now. So you send them somewhere else and they're still getting into trouble, and you try to trap them, it's really hard, if not impossible, to get them to go back in that trap then. And then the sad reality is there are also becoming fewer and fewer remote areas to take these bears that we trap to. So we're just moving them to another area where they're going to run into, you know, more problems a lot of times. Some of the areas that we try to take bears, like Ocala, already have a ton of bears. And so, you know, trying to stick, especially a young male there, they're just getting kicked around by all the other established males, and they just make their way back out into civilization and problems again. So our best bet is just to try to keep these bears from ever getting into trouble in the first place and habituated to humans and food. Otherwise, they've got a rough road ahead. Bears, like I say, they use all kinds of habitat in Florida, and they will oftentimes wander into a neighborhood, sometimes just innocently. You know, they may just be wandering through, and you know, our stance here is that if they came in, they can go out. They can find their way out if they found their way in. But a lot of times this isn't easy because they attract attention. You know, there's a bear up a tree there, and you can see everybody's like, oh man, there's a bear in the tree. And of course that bear is scared to death up there. It's like, there's no way I'm coming down right now. So, you know, we try to relay, you know, that if we can just like make the scene calm, you know, let everybody, you know, you can look at it for a little bit, but then if everybody eventually will go on their way, and you know, especially after dark, if it's quiet, you know, typically a bear will come down and move on out of the area. Again, if there are no attractants there. Now, if the garbage can's out by the road, that bear may come down and get right into that garbage can. So, you know, that's something to deal with. But they will find their way out if they can. We don't just ask people to secure their attractants out of, you know, the goodness of their heart. Hopefully most people do, but sadly, if they don't, there is a law against feeding bears in Florida. That includes intentionally feeding and unintentionally feeding, just leaving your garbage out or bird food or stuff like that if it becomes a problem. Penalties for violating this law range mostly on the side of just like education and just working with people to try to rectify the problem, but repeat offenses can get up to like a 3rd degree felony. So we're pretty serious, you know. It's a serious problem, leaving stuff out for bears. If we want to live in a place where we can live with the bears but not have issues, sadly, we have to make it a serious thing. So bears that become, you know, accustomed to getting into trash or something, it can take time for them to learn that, hey, there's nothing here for me now. The property owner or the neighborhood or whatever has done their due diligence. They've secured all their attractants. That bear may stay around for a while because it'll take a little bit for it to learn that there's nothing there for it. So it's imperative that the people stay vigilant and scaring the bear off, you know, making themselves known, not making a welcoming environment for the bear, keeping everything secured for a while until the bear goes away, preferably forever, but at least until the bear goes away for a while. Because it only takes one time to slip up, like it says here, and you know that bear's back and back in business. This video kind of demonstrates how assertiveness can help. That's a big bear. I guess that's in Connecticut, but you know, that's just, you know, what you might have to do sometimes if you're in that situation. That lady handled it very well, and that bear didn't want any part of it. She stood her ground and got him on out. Wrap it up? All right, he's saying wrap it up. Thank y'all.